Could the Dallas Cowboys make a big signing now that they've got $11 million more in cap space? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On Cowboys. Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, we've got Twitter questions today. Let's jump right into it. The first question comes from at Dr_Cowboys. He wants to know, the Dallas Cowboys are set to gain nearly $11 million in cap space on June 1st after releasing Ezekiel Elliott. Do you think they will make a big signing over the next couple of weeks?
I don't know if they'll make a big signing. I mean, I think that, everyone's kind of like looking at this money that is, about to roll down here in a couple of days and thinking, now they're going to have, excess of almost $20 million. They'll have a lot of room to play with. The Cowboys have plans for that money. I mean, they've been waiting on and counting on that money, and I don't think that they have plans to take that money and necessarily spend it all on one player if that's what everyone's hoping for. I think the smart thing, that the smart kind of bet on this would be that money likely ends up somehow in CeeDee Lamb or Trayvon Diggs' pocket. Yeah. It goes to help kind of sign college the college draft picks and incentives that get earned and that sort of thing. Now, do I think the Cowboys will sign somebody with that money? I do think that somebody will get signed. I think that they probably will sign a veteran or two here or there just to kind of supplement what we've seen. We talked about that, right? Yeah, exactly. Like, see what you've got in training camp, maybe go get a veteran to kind of fill in holes here or there a little bit in a couple weeks into training camp or maybe a couple weeks before the season. I think that that's possible, but I don't know that I'm not anticipating they get that money in their bank account and then them suddenly turning around and writing one big check for one player who maybe played for the Arizona Cardinals.
I was going to say, so we should at least talk about DeAndre Hopkins because we haven't talked about this since before free agency. DeAndre Hopkins has been released. The Cowboys do have the cap space. I think I saw the number today. They're like 5th or 6th in effective cap space. Mm-hmm. Is there any appeal to you at all to go out and sign DeAndre Hopkins now? Because we've talked about like championship windows. The Cowboys are in one. Instead of worrying about your cap space in 2025 and 26, like, do you just sign Hopkins to a 1-year deal and see how it goes?
I think the downside here, and this is not a no, the downside there is, how does it have an effect on your ability to sign CeeDee Lamb to a long-term deal sooner than later, right? Does it have an effect on his deal and his market and that sort of thing? What's the behind the scenes effect there? That's I think more than anything. I think, and the other part of this is that I think it's a pretty big unknown as to what DeAndre Hopkins' number is going to be.
I think after the Odell contract, I think that's kind of skewed everything, right? If Odell Beckham can get 1 year, $16 million after not playing at all last year, why should DeAndre Hopkins take less?
And the other part of it too was that if teams were interested at DeAndre Hopkins at $14 or $15 million, why didn't they just trade for him? Like, instead of going through all the rigmarole of having to deal with a free agency market and deal with the competing teams. I mean, if he really is a guy that's going to command that kind of money, more than one team is going to be vying for his services, and you may end up paying more than that, because DeAndre Hopkins did play football last year and he has consistently produced. So I think for the Cowboys, it's more about, is this a prudent move or not, and do you have an immediate plan for him and to get $15 million or whatever it is worth of value out of him immediately? And I think that's not a clear picture. So
I think they could do it if they wanted to, right? Like, if they wanted to sign DeAndre Hopkins, they have the cap space, they could do it. They could figure out everything else down the road. I've also seen the argument, hey, if you sign DeAndre Hopkins, that means that Michael Gallup is your fourth receiver, and that guy's got to play special teams. There are ways around that. Like
There's
we
ways
talk
around
about
that,
special
too.
teams a lot,
Yeah.
but there are ways around that. I think the bigger problem is the Cowboys made 2 moves this offseason that makes it kind of hard to bring in DeAndre Hopkins. Number one, trading for Brandon Cooks. Like Brandon Cooks has a fairly big contract. You want him to have a solid role in the team. The second one is they restructured Michael Gallup's deal to push his money more down the road in 2024 and 25. You're kind of tied to Michael Gallup and you kind of need him to work out. I don't know if you can really pay that guy that much money to be your number 4 receiver. And on top of that, Landon, like, is there enough targets for DeAndre Hopkins to come here?
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is again, that's what I kind of meant by can you get the value out of him, right? Like you've got a lot of mouths to feed already. And on top of that, you want to play a lot of 2 tight end formation, which means that, one of these guys is going to be off the field. And that could be Gallup, and that's fine. But I just think that you've already got a lot of money invested in the wide receiver position. You've already committed quite a few targets to all these folks. And then on top of that, you've also got other players on other spots that you want to get the football to. So, look, is a DeAndre Hopkins target better than your tight end 2 target?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of like having to deploy 11 personnel in order to kind of only get into a spot where you can give all these targets that you need, as opposed to being flexible enough to get into the formation you want to get into, I think there's something there as well.
Again, I'm not against adding DeAndre Hopkins.
I'm not either.
But it seems like the Cowboys decided to choose Brandon Cooks over DeAndre Hopkins, right? Like you probably only had one spot on your roster for a 30-year-old receiver with that much money tied into it. I'm okay with Cook over Hopkins. I think Hopkins is a better player, but the Cowboys needed more speed. I've got a feeling that Hopkins is he's probably not going to land in Dallas, even though the Cowboys do have the space and the financial flexibility to make that move if they wanted to.
I agree. I think that if the Cowboys wanted to do it and they did do it, I wouldn't kill them for it. I think it makes a lot of sense adding that kind of talent.
Right?
Obviously, that makes sense. I'm also not going to kill them for not doing it, right? Because I think that there is a lot of bad fit here. Right. There's a lot of things that you want some of these down roster wide receivers to get opportunity because you need them. You might need them in the future. And the more you start to pay these high end players, the more you need your younger draft picks to work out. And that means that you have to provide them opportunity. If you continually add these short-term fixes here, great for 2023, great for trying to win the Super Bowl this year. And if that's the plan, that's fantastic. But the downside there is that you don't get as much opportunity to develop your down roster wide receivers, which may hurt you in the long run. I'm not saying that's a no. Yep. I'm just saying that is something to consider when calculating the pros and cons of this.
Really quickly, before we move on, I do get the sense that they're probably going to bring in another veteran or two, like you mentioned. Remember, the Cowboys signed Anthony Barr. It was once training camp started last year. Yeah. Maybe they'll do a similar move. I'm still looking at the running back position. That's still one where I feel like I don't think it's going to be Ezekiel Elliott coming back, but maybe it's somebody like a Leonard Fournette or somebody just to give them something else in that backfield. I'm looking at that position. And then left guard. Like if it's clear that Matt Farniak isn't good enough to start and it's not going to be Chuma Edoga, maybe that's when the Cowboys try to bring in Dalton Reisner, or maybe it's Andrew Norwell, who the Washington Commanders seems like they're going to release here in the next couple of days. That's what I'm going to be kind of looking for.
Yeah, and honestly, I think we're kind of looking at positions that obviously are a little bit soft for the Cowboys, but really just any kind of positional value where you feel like you can improve your team or increase the rotational backup. These guys are going to get cut. These veteran players who have skins on the wall, they're going to get cut for some of these younger players that are cheaper. So the Cowboys may have an opportunity to kind of bring somebody in that has some experience. Either as doesn't even necessarily need to be a starter. We just listed starter positions, but like there are several key backup spots that you could feel like you could throw in a guy. I mean, honestly, like, would you be shocked if they brought in a veteran backup linebacker? Like you just almost like they did with last year? I wouldn't either. I think that there are spots where if the right guy gets cut, the Cowboys would be interested in, and not just specifically, the left guard or defensive tackle positions that we've talked about before.
All right. Lane, let's answer another question, including who is more likely to have a breakout season between Jalen Tolbert and Kelvin Joseph next. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious snack but don't want all the sugar and the calories? Then you need to try the best tasting protein bar ever. It's Built Bar. You've absolutely got to try them. If you're like me, you're trying to be a little bit healthier as we get into summer, but you don't want to compromise on taste, then we've got just the thing for you. It's Built Bars and Built Puffs. Built Bars are healthy and they taste amazing. Seriously, they taste so good that you're not even going to know that they're healthy. You've absolutely got to try them because they have 100% real dark chocolate. That's right, real dark chocolate. And they come in so many unbelievably great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and cookies and cream. Not sure how Built does it because they have amazing macros, but they taste just like a candy bar. Only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't even have to wait to get a box. For years, we've been telling you to go to Built.com, order your boxes over there, which you can still do, by the way. But now you can run into your local Walmart or Sam's Club and pick up some specialty boxes. That's right. Head to Walmart, go to the pharmacy section, and pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puff. Or if you happen to live near Sam's Club, you can run in, grab a 13-bar box with some of the hit flavors, including brownie batter puff or churro puff, and you can thank us later. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Everydayers. Tomorrow on the show, we've got a special guest Vach Lombardi, to talk about the Cowboys offensive line, who's going to be starting at left guard, who should be the starting right tackle, all that and so much more. All right, Landon, next question. Who is more likely to have a breakout season, Kelvin Joseph or Jalen Tolbert?
It's a good question. I think Jalen Tolbert. I think I'm just basing that on the fact that we've seen Joseph, we've seen him play out there. And I still believe in Joseph, and I think he can do it because I've seen skill set that I think equally translates. I think he needs to get his head and his maturity level right in order to kind of stay on assignment. But I think he has every capability of doing it. I think for Tolbert, we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen his opportunity on the field very often. Not in the way that we have with Joseph. So I think I'll probably put my money on Tolbert simply because we haven't seen him get his chance yet, and we've seen Joseph kind of get a couple different chances, and he's still kind of hoping to develop after getting some time on the field.
Who do you think has the easier path to snaps? Is it Tolbert, who is pretty clearly at best the wide receiver 4, or do you think it's Joseph?
That's a really good question too.
Because I kind of like some of the down the roster receivers a little bit. Like, you've got some guys
Joseph,
Dennis Houston and Simi Fehoko on offense. Go ahead.
No, and those are good points, and I think the competition is tough at both spots. But I think that the Joseph does simply because I feel like he'll make the roster because he can play special teams,
exactly.
Right? Like, yes. And I think this is the reason that Tolbert hasn't gotten the opportunity that Joseph has, and maybe that's our answer, and it's simply because he's going to give Joseph is going to get more opportunity because he's going to be active special teams, and it's going to give him a chance to play on the field, right? Like his ability to play defense is kind of secondary to his special teams, but it still provides him opportunity that that Tolbert didn't get necessarily last year. So unless Tolbert comes out and really kind of shows out and takes a step away from the Fehokus, the Houstons, the rest of the fourth wide receiver kind of competition, I don't imagine that he's necessarily going to get a better opportunity than Joseph.
Yep.
But I do think that with Tolbert, you have some unknown that you don't have with Joseph. So maybe when he does get that opportunity, he has a chance to kind of really shine and show what he's got.
And the other thing with Tolbert is he's not even competing only with the wide receivers. He's also competing with the tight ends, right? Like, let's just say Jake Ferguson has an awesome training camp, and it's clear the Cowboys want to use 2 tight ends, even more so than they did last year. There just might not be very many snaps where it's 4 receivers on the field. And if which we hardly saw at all last year.
Yeah.
And if the Cowboys are, decreasing the number of 3 receiver set snaps, there's just going to be no snaps available for Jalen Tolbert. So he's got to have a big camp. But the other question I had for you is, where do we expect Jalen Tolbert to play like during camp and preseason, do you think it's going to be on the outside? Do you think it's better off him being like the primary backup to CD Lamb? What are your thoughts?
I kind of think outside, I view him more as a Gallup replacement than like some of these other guys. I mean, I think they'll try to work him in all three different spots. But I really feel like the Z and the slot spot in this offense have been kind of where they've been trying to focus, the targets through. That's where they've really tried to work CeeDee Lamb and kind of
Mhm.
get him in to get better matchups and obviously give him better release options. So I wouldn't be surprised if he starts out, especially since he's a little bit bigger body, on the line as an X, and kind of got more opportunities to kind of do some of the more down the field stuff, big body stuff. You see the stuff you kind of see Gallup do, right?
It's
Where
just
he's
weird
going,
because he didn't do that at all in college. Like he was really a slot receiver in school.
yeah, I know. I think that he will get opportunities there because that's where he played. But I just think that look, if you want to get him on the field, you're not getting him on the field in the position where he's going to be the focus of the offense.
No, I know. That's what's hard about this. That's why it's
So
such a unique situation.
he's got to find a way to kind of fit in one of those other spots, like rotating in for Gallup or rotating in for Cooks or something like that. Because you're just not gonna spell CD Lamb and then have Tolbert replace CD Lamb. Like you would more likely focus the offense through Cooks or through Ferguson at that point, or Pollard at that point if Lamb had to come off the field for a reason. So I do think that slot makes some sense because that's where he played in college. But I think where the Cowboys need him the most, I would feel, is probably likely outside.
I wonder what the plan is because last year we had Stephen Jones and Will McClay said they both they put too much on Jalen Tolbert's plate, trying to get him to learn all three positions. So to me, that means we're going to maybe try to focus him on one spot and see if he can get really good there. Where is that? Is it the X receiver? Is it in the slot? Is it the Z? I don't know, but that's something that once we get to training camp in late July and August, that's one of the things I'm going to be looking forward to seeing the most, because I think that's going to tell us a lot about how quickly he can get on the field.
I completely agree. Absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's play a game, Landon, on which players are the most likely to be released and which ones would surprise us the most next. All right, Landon, we've got some potential roster cuts that people have sent to us. I'm going to have you rank these 1 through 10. 10 being that you would be absolutely shocked that this player got cut. 1, not shocked at all. It's basically a given. So, first one, this one comes from Christian. He wants to know about Dorrance Armstrong.
Man, okay, so I'm giving them a 1 through 10 as far. Okay, cool. I would be pretty shocked if Dorrance Armstrong got cut. I wouldn't be shocked if he got traded, or something like that. So I would say 10. I'm sorry, 10 is
10 is like you're absolutely shocked. 1 is not at all.
Okay. I would say 4. Okay. I think it could happen, but I would be surprised.
You and I talked about this offline. I think it was about a week ago. The Cowboys can save over $5 million if they move on from Dorrance Armstrong. And I don't think that's not an insignificant amount of money, but he's also a good player. So you're not going to cut him just to cut him, just to save the $5 million. I do think if Isaiah Land has a nice camp and Sam Williams, it's clear that he's taken another step, and Dante Fowler looks like he could be your 3rd or 4th defensive end, and Chauncey Golston's having a really nice camp. Like maybe you figure, okay, hey, there's not a big drop off between Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler. Let's save that $5 million and allocate it somewhere else. But it almost has more to do with everybody else on the roster other than Dorrance Armstrong, because I think we kind of know what Dorrance Armstrong is.
Yeah, Dorrance Armstrong played really great football.
I mean, and it's a good deal at $5 million. It's just if it's close enough.
Last year. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is I totally think he's a $5 million player. I think that contract's tradable. I mean that's a great deal for a guy who will get you 6 sacks and be maybe your best special teams player. Like that's really good money.
But he might be your 4th or 5th defensive end this year, and the Cowboys might feel like, hey, if we can pay for our slot corner, Jordan Lewis, who's $5 million. By releasing Dorrance Armstrong and not getting worse, let's do it.
Yeah, I think his situation is very unique in that he's too good, I think, for them to just straight up cut. I would be surprised if they straight up cut him, but I could easily see a team giving the Cowboys something for him because there aren't the pass rush is a necessity, and there aren't a ton of these guys. You can get a guy for cheap that will give you, like I said, 5 or 6 sacks a year on limited snaps, and he's, like you said, you're a special teams ace.
Yep.
I think a team will flip a fifth or sixth round pick for that, and it certainly is. That's something that's certainly more palatable than just trying to release him because you have too much talent.
Yeah,
Position, right?
and you don't make this move now. There's no incentive for the Cowboys to trade him or release him now. You wait until training camp to see what your roster looks like, to see if you're healthy. Because if DeMarcus Lawrence, crossing our fingers, goes down in camp and he's out for 8 weeks, you really don't want to move on from Dorrance Armstrong. But if you get through camp and everybody's healthy, okay, maybe it's a little bit more palatable. This next one is really interesting. I think we have this tendency to assume that if you made the roster last year, you're automatically a given to make it the following year. This next one, Peyton Hendershot from Kyle. He wants to know, is he a lock to make the roster?
I feel like he is.
Because he's not your first tight end.
No.
And he's probably not going to be your second tight end. Then it comes down to, who do you like on special teams more, Sean McEwen or Peyton Hendershot? Or do you just keep another running back like Hunter Lepke, who can do a lot of the same kind of things?
Yeah, I think the other thing to remember when we talk about the special team stuff, because that got brought up a little bit earlier as well, too, and you kind of hinted at this, I just wanted to expound on it, is that the angles have changed this year with the special teams. I mean, you're not rostering a second running back or running back one or whatever you want to call Zeke, who doesn't play special teams. So you're already gaining a one player, hopefully, that plays special teams in your backfield. And I think there's a couple other spots where you can kind of sub in a player who will play special teams versus a player that didn't previously. Right. Yeah. So I think you have to think about this stuff, and thinking about special teams is important with, game day roster management. But I tend to think that Hendershot is someone that they have plans for, and whether or not, that's necessarily this year or kind of just moving forward. I think they obviously like what he does. I think they think that he kind of does something a little bit different than the other guys do, as far as kind of being a down the field, over the rim sort of receiving threat. Right. I think it's going to be an important year for Hendershot, but I do think that if he's shown even just a medium level of improvement in his blocking and just kind of gotten a little bit stronger, I feel like there's a very good chance that he makes the roster. I would put him at a 2 or 3. Right. Okay. One is the shocked one. Right? Will you be shocked if they get cut? I keep forgetting what the
one would be. You would not be shocked if he gets cut.
Okay. Well, then I would say 8 or
okay.
7
that's
or 8. And then I need to flip the other one too to 6 instead of 4. Okay. Sorry.
I kind of agree with you, although very much like the conversation we were just having about Jalen Tolbert is, I wonder if Peyton Hendershot isn't just competing with the tight ends for a roster spot. We mentioned Hunter Lepke. Maybe they'll go deep at receiver. They obviously like a couple of these guys that they signed as undrafted free agents. The South Carolina receiver, Brooks, who they drafted really to be a special teams guy in the 7th round. Maybe they just go a little bit long there and try to find their next Noah Brown, who can do some of the tight end blocking, wide receiver stuff. So, but I agree. I think Hendershot's going to be in the roster. Last one. And this one's very interesting. Neville Gallimore going into the final year of his rookie contract. He's got, I think it's a $2.1 million cap hit this year. Still pretty young. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a very good shot that Gallimore gets cut or moved off in some way, right? And I think the writing, has been on the wall, or at least it feels like he's, I don't want to say earned a cut, but it feels like this experiment's gone on long enough, right? Like we've waited and waited for him to get better, and it doesn't feel like there's a ton of improvements. I honestly was on board with cutting him last season, like at the end of the year.
I think they released better players than Neville Gallimore to save his spot. Like they cut Terrell Basham and Tristan Hill, who I just thought were playing better.
Yeah. And I was surprised that they cut Tristan Hill over Neville Gallimore, to be honest. I not that either one of them was playing good football.
And John Ridgeway.
Yeah. So I think there's a very high likelihood. I mean, especially if they can find another defensive tackle, like, someone gets cut or they're able to sign somebody. I think, they would just at this point rather find another body or find a way to cobble together the position with other defensive tackles and defensive ends. It's just been one of those things where it feels like his snaps got wasted and he just wasn't able to kind of do anything in the pass or the run game.
And he was inactive both games in the playoffs. I mean, that just
Yeah.
tells you kind of a lot, right?
Yeah,
So,
they did everything they could to not have to make him an active game day on the active game day roster. I think if they can find anything that's even decent replacement level, they'll likely cut him. So
Maybe
I will
it's
say
just-
a one.
Maybe it's Junior Fahoku that just, if he shows that he could be a interior defensive player in the NFL, or Chauncey Golston makes a step. I'm with you. A 1 or 2 for me. I kind of expect Gallimore to be released at this point. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Again, every day, or tomorrow on the show, special guest Voch Lombardi. Make sure you tune in for that. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Please go check us out on YouTube. You can follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. We'll see you next time.